Hey, hey. So, in part one, I touched on one history in particular as recorded by Herodotus, and after him, several others. This report speaks of the existence of giant ants mining gold in North India, which are a hairy and dangerous obstacle for anyone attempting to get their hands on that gold. Um, 4 centuries later, Pliny the Elder compares this report with the occurrence of Griffins and their battles with the Arismapi over the gold and the silver mines in the north. We touched on some pros and contras to the hypothesis that the legend of Griffins is based on dinosaur skeletons encountered by these first miners. But yeah, what about the ants? What could be the possible origin of this particular story? In the 4,000-year-old Indian epos Mahabharata, we find mention of this ant cult and the name under which it is known, namely Pipilika. The word Pipilika is based on a masculine noun Pilika, which simply means ant. Pipilica is little ant, a feminine noun, and the neutral noun pipilica means gold that is dug up by ants. Keep in mind that termites are popularly called ants as well in India, but also in other regions of the world. Nearly every paper will highlight the linguistical connections between Greek, Persian, Proto-Vedic, early Sanskrit, Tibetan, Mongolian, or Siberian words that can be added into the mix. The word was also known among Tibetans and Mongolians at that time. Some relate the ants to a certain Mongol tribe, again based on the name, but it could just as well ultimately lead back to a well known folk tale of that region in which there is mention of an ant king whom's subjects collected grains to help the hero in the story. The Proto-Vedic linguistical connection may refer to some words still in use by people, some who are said to be the last and direct descendants of ancient Meluhan societies. But just like Herodotus, I have no way of confirming that, or I will leave it to someone else. Some linguists have claimed even the ants to be none other than hyenas, a claim based on the similarities between the Greek word for ant and the Persian word for dog. There have been different attempts to find an explanation via linguistics, but the linguistics offer only a meager argument, I think. Well, and then in the midst of the 20th century, however, a French ethnologist called Michel Pucel finds an animal that may have been the gold digging ant of antiquity. In a remote region in the north of Pakistan, Himalayas, he located a marmot that could fit the description. This Himalayan marmot is about the size of the so called furry ants. It lives in deep burrows indeed. They inhabit alpine grasslands throughout the Himalayan regions of Nepal, India, Pakistan, and the Qinghai Tibet plateau of China and beyond that. But they're at altitudes from 3,500 to 5,200 meters. Um, I suppose the lack of predators like the snow leopards, which feeds on the marmots, assures their abundance in mountain regions of Central Asia. They are in no way endangered at the moment. Not so for this little fella here. It has been spotted only a few years ago in Chinese Western Mountains in Xinjiang province when it was assumed to have become extinct. Curiously enough, it is called the Ili Pika. I didn't find the meaning of its name, but picas, or a small rabbit-like rodent that occurs in North America, Asia, and Eastern Europe. The illipica is as large as a Himalayan marmot, but there is no direct relation to picas or there is no relation between the picas and the marmots. The name pica seems to be derived from Tunguskic languages, from Manchuria and eastern Siberia. And I personally do not see a clear link between that animal and the mining of gold, apart from an obvious linguistical connection. But the marmot, however, it digs deep tunnels down to 10 meters or 35 feet, all the way to through three sorts of deposits we find in the Himalaya. The alluvial gold deposit, which is a slow deposit like in riverbeds, the diluvial deposits, what they call fast deposits by flood, and fluvio glacial deposits, which is caused by temporary glacial melting water release. These marmots live in large families, which means basically that the area would be mold severely. I mean, the marmots would have moved a large amount of the earth from the layers they crossed through. I also ask myself the question if the long description by Herodotus of the heat and what position the sun in the sky is at best to gather the gold, if that may refer to the hibernation period of these animals. I did find a mention of a coat somewhere made for Darius the First as a royal gift from the people of this region, which was made of Himalayan marmot fur, and this fur I imagine would be glittering in the sunlight because of the real gold dust that sticks to their beautiful fur, adding to the whole, mystical thing or mythological thing about the story, perhaps. So this solves the riddle of Herodotus' furry ants. That is, if one overlooks a few irregularities, for example, that these marmots pose no danger at all for anyone with the intention to destroy its burrow in search of gold. The creatures are just too cute to be a satisfactory answer to the riddle. So, what else is there? For a possible occasion, we have Herodotus' description of the land of the darts, comprising a large belt of sub-Himalayan mountain ranges from the northern tip of India all the way up to Pakistan, China, mountain passes that connect Pakistan, China, and southeast Afghanistan. We are also given some clues by the Rig Veda, one of the oldest Vedic hymns. The Sindh or Indus River is described in the Rig Veda as the river of gold, and one can take that very literally. The Himalayan riverbeds contain a lot of alluvial gold, and this was skillfully collected by the members of the tribes who dwelt on the river banks. An old Vedic name for the Indus River is Hiranyaya, and the gold from this river was called Hiranya. Also, the Ganges and the Jambu River were said to contain gold. This alluvial gold was one of ancient India's main resources. It reminds me of the story of Jason and the Golden Fleece, but I shall not digress. In the Sabha Parva, book 2 of the Mahabharata, a prince speaks to his father of the royal gifts he received from the kings of the northern lands. There is a clear reference to locations in the mountain regions of northeast Pakistan and Kashmir. The book specifically mentions the darts, a denominator for several people like the Kalash, the Balikas, the Khazas, the Tokaras, all Indo-European tribes and considered the last of the Indo-Aryans. There are also the Pashtun connected to the Saka through language and so on. And I would also forget the Kalash related people from Kafiristan or Nuristan who are known to have belonged to tribes who collected gold at the gorges of the river Indus, Sindh, or Saraswati. What unfolds is an ancient history of tribes that stood the test of time, inhabiting these regions that have been contested area for so long time, but yeah, who are now rapidly disappearing. They are the lost descendants from cultures who once had a considerable power there. The regions they ruled over allowed them to steadily gather wealth, and not necessarily because of the Pipilika gold only provided by the mountains. To be in control of those mountain passes that allowed long distance trade networks was undoubtedly one factor why the region had been contested and still is, with the new Silk Road developing to the full. It is, of course, also a place where taxes could be collected. According to an American attache called Anders, who was able to enter theocratic Tibet of 1936, the sixth Panchen Lama, whom he was in close contact with, was planning to modernize his country. The Lama was willing to offer millions worth of gold powder to achieve this goal. Anders stated that the monasteries had been collecting the Pipiliki gold since centuries. The Tibetan leader died shortly after, however, and the current Dalai Lama was a child when he was put on the throne to eventually flee his country in the 50s with the invasion of the Chinese. From then on, it all became very unclear what eventually happened with all this gold, let alone what its true origin was. The literary sources of Indian antiquity reveal the common use of Pipilika gold in the practice of Ayurvedic medicine. They describe the processing of the powder into creams and potions. It is known to be the case in ancient China as well, and I think it is safe to say that the practice of using minerals as medicine and in cosmetics was legio all over the ancient world. I will link a paper on Indian archaeometallurgy. The description for the Pipilika gold given by the Indian scholars, however, is that which I have not even mentioned. According to them, Pipilika gold is exactly what it says it is: gold dust gathered by the termites and ants and panned out by the gold collectors. I think in the earlier episodes of my primordial mounts series here on termite mounts, I made enough references to the importance of termite mounds for even today, to this day, for gold miners. Yeah, so so the marmots they still occur in the Tibetan plateaus. So chances are that also the Tibetans collected any gold that these animals might have dug up back then. But I think it is reasonable to assume they had other means as well. China has currently over 80 gold mines in Tibet alone, and it is increasingly present in the resource rich areas in Pakistan and Afghanistan as well, by the way. I'm just saying. So maybe the confusion is merely linguistical in nature after all. I imagine a place at those old crossroads where travelers and merchants from all over would meet. Their stories and legends go from mouth to mouth around the fire or at the well, where ideas and innovations are exchanged, sold, or even stolen. Such a place is where Herodotus might have collected at least a part of his reports. I suppose that is how aspects of myth and legend can come into existence. Maybe they started out as lies and fantasies, invented to keep curious competition away and their income and peace secured. A scary legend on giant hairy ants should keep strangers at a distance, and Herodotus reported what he heard, despite not being able to check for fake news. I need to mention here as well that just as I finished this video, I found a source mentioning that a lot of what Herodotus has written on India is probably based on earlier writings of an Ionian explorer called Hikataios of Melite, a name which I have never heard mentioned before, but seems to have played a huge role, historical role for the Lydians back then. So yeah, honor to whom honor is due, I always say. Huh? I call it a day. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you found this interesting enough. I will see you soon.